Readers of The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers frequently ask about the expression, the phantom of truth. Very enigmatic expression indeed. What does it mean? Is the phrase phantom of truth like Phantom of the Opera? That is, does it denote some entity, a phantasmal entity, and that it somehow represents or has something to do with truth? Or is the phrase phantom of truth more like the phrase myth of the given, or illusion of meaning, in which case the expression would really mean something like truth is nothing but a phantom, i.e., there is no truth? And what, if anything, does either disambiguation have to do with the sort of horror that Chambers was evoking in his work? Welcome to PhD&D, everyone. I'm Dr. Bowers, and today I'm going to talk about the phantom of truth, at least as it appears in the work of Robert W. Chambers' 1895 anthology, The King in Yellow. And I'm going to use it as a kind of guide to the sort of horror that Chambers introduces us to. Many people classify The King in Yellow as cosmic horror, and for reasons we'll get to when we discuss the work of August Derleth, they often associate The King in Yellow, falsely, with the work of H.P. Lovecraft. Since many of my viewers doubtlessly appreciate the work of H.P. Lovecraft, it might be helpful in the way of introducing Chambers to talk about how the two different writers convey different ideas for what horror fiction should be. Now, the expression Phantom of Truth appears a couple of times in Chambers' 1895 anthology, both occasions in the weird tales that constitute the anthology's first 4 entries. In The Repairer of Reputations, the Phantom of Truth is listed in a longer list of things or places or entities generally speaking, a list that includes locations such as Carcosa, Aldebaran, and the Hyades, but also distinctly Chambers-esque neologisms such as Hastur, Etil, Demhi, and the Lake of Hali. It's because the expression Phantom of Truth is among the items from which Hildred Castaigne claims to be descended, that we might get the false impression that Phantom of Truth refers to some being, like Phantom of the Opera. For this same reason, I think, as well as the pernicious Derleth, we also tend to associate Hastur with some kind of entity rather than being a place. Now, the Phantom of Truth, on my reading, is not a place, making it all the weirder to cite in Hildred's lineage, but Hildred, as we know, is not the most reliable narrator. Meanwhile, in The Yellow Sign, when Jack Scott and Tessie have read the stage play, and they're talking to each other, perhaps telepathically, about its contents, they mention the mystery of the Hyades, which they came to understand, and also that the Phantom of Truth was laid bare. These sound like they have something more in common. The mystery of the Hyades, that expression invokes some kind of deep, cosmic secret of the stars. So perhaps the Phantom of Truth could be something like that. It would especially seem so if you're reading the expression Phantom of Truth in that second way I mentioned, as denoting the idea that truth itself is non-existent, that there is no truth, truth is a ghost, truth is a phantom, and so on. Ultimately, however, I think that the root of the phrase Phantom of Truth can be found in the poem by Edgar Allan Poe, The Conqueror Worm. As I've mentioned in previous lectures, The Conqueror Worm by Edgar Allan Poe presents a theater of cosmic proportions and a stage play put on in that theater for the entertainment of angels. It is a depiction of the human condition in which the powers of heaven look down at us, look down at humanity, and confirm that humanity is nothing more than worm food. Indeed, the real star of the show is the worm that eats us, not us. And amid this nihilistic lesson, human beings are represented as mimes that mutter and mumble about the stage, whose movements are at the bidding of vast formless things, that is to say, their movements are not their own, they don't even control what they do, and who together aim, if they could aim at anything, to chase mere phantoms. This motley drama, oh be sure, it shall not be forgot, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, and through a circle that ever returneth into that self-same spot, with much of madness and more of sin, and horror the soul of the plot. Human beings are represented as mimes, forevermore chasing after a phantom. And indeed, if we're considering this whole stage play to be symbolic and representing the human condition, and we've got the kind of romanticism on our minds that was also on Poe's mind, this should all lead us to some nihilistic or at least pessimistic conclusions. While we live, we human beings chase after noble ideals. Freedom, truth, justice, beauty, friendship, and more. But if we are merely worm food, how real could those things be? Are we chasing mere illusions, mere mirages, phantoms? I think the answer is yes, and that the phrase phantom of truth actually refers, in the pages of Chambers, to the idea that there is no truth, that truth is a ghost, truth is a phantom. It's not that there's some spooky entity in a yellow robe with a white mask and it's the phantom of truth. No. The actual horror is that there is no truth. There is no goodness, there is no morality, there's nothing to ground us. We, according to the pages of that stage play, The King in Yellow, are in a purposeless universe. Again, this is the worldview of the decadents. A worldview in which Chambers, at least in his 1895 stories, seems to be rebelling. And there's more historical context to add than this. It's worth noting that two of the other most prominent references in Chambers' text within a text are Carcosa and Hastur, and I'm going to have a lot to say about each of these things in separate videos coming up. For now, I'd just like to note, first, that Carcosa is always depicted as lost. Lost Carcosa. Carcosa is lost, and that fact about Carcosa is pretty much the most important thing about it. Meanwhile, in Ambrose Bierce's short story, Hyades the Shepherd, that short story from which Chambers probably got the name Hastur, Hastur is represented as a capricious god of shepherds who is also happiness itself. So that the lesson of Bierce's tale, from which Chambers got the name Hastur, is the lesson of how fleeting happiness is. So when you read The King in Yellow, that is Chambers' text within a text, that is to say the forbidden stage play, you become obsessed with a lost beautiful world, a beautiful world that's lost, as well as an identification of happiness itself with a capricious and elusive deity. Amidst this, it would make perfect sense to depict truth itself as also a phantom. In that case, Chambers' text within a text, the stage play, has a very clear picture. Beauty is lost, happiness is fleeting, there is no truth, and we cannot tell which direction we are falling in. We might also point out that the name Carcosa comes from another Ambrose Bierce story, an inhabitant of Carcosa, when a heaven-bound soul realizes that there's nothing waiting for him. That the blank space where heaven should be is nothing but an empty expanse, a lost, meaningless wilderness. There's also the poem Carcassonne by the writer Gustave Naudud. In those verses, Carcassonne is a city that a man desperately wants to see and never got to see, and the poem concludes that we all have our Carcassonne. There's lots of evidence to suggest that Carcosa is this lost or unattainable ideal. The reference to Hastur indicates the idea of happiness being fleeting and never attainable. And amid this, we have the expression phantom of truth. I think Chambers is giving us The King in Yellow, that is the stage play, as an atheistic, nihilistic, anti-theological text. A text based on Huysmans, which will make you find beauty in evil, indeed. Now, what does this all have to do with cosmic horror? What does that have to do with Lovecraft, you might ask? Well, I would classify Chambers as one of those Enlightenment-era authors who was profoundly concerned with the idea of the supernatural being erased by science, and with the supernatural, all meaning, all purpose, the very idea of the universe having a goal. Consider the other features of the European Enlightenment being, indeed, a spread of atheism and iconoclastic ideology generally, the overthrow of kings and queens, the challenging of traditions, and the discoveries of Darwin revealing that there was no Garden of Eden at all, but that there is a continuum between animal life and human life. A panic then arises among some thinkers. Could anything be sacred? Could anything be good? How could life have any meaning if there's no supernatural power to establish it? Has heaven been lost? Is Carcosa lost? And indeed, it was in the late 19th century that we had Nietzsche writing about the death of God, Dostoevsky ruminating on the possibility of the same, Kierkegaard mentioning that there's no way to truly be faithful, but you somehow have to try per impossible. And in general, the roots of existentialist philosophy that would become preoccupied with our isolation in a meaningless world. Indeed, I think the philosophical excesses of the decadent movement in some ways are forerunners to all of that. And Chambers, as a writer of his time, was conceiving of horror fiction and real horror as being connected to those Enlightenment-era discoveries. If God is dead and nothing is sacred, after all, truth may as well be a phantom. And to these well-known concerns, I would add another concern that I think doesn't get discussed too often, but definitely preoccupied Chambers' mind: the fear that there might not be any true love. What if the universe is set up in such a way that no matter who you love, they're probably never going to love you back? Wouldn't that be terrible? And what if true love itself were nothing but some kind of hormonal impulse? Wouldn't that be even worse? I feel as though Chambers really worries about that, given the plights of his protagonists and the characters in all of his lesser-known stories, too. For Chambers, horror is the discovery and the humility before the possibility that the world may be purposeless and loveless and empty. This is slightly different from what you get from H.P. Lovecraft, in my opinion. For H.P. Lovecraft, there is a kind of gap between the horrible truths of the world and the limitations of our consciousness. As Lovecraft famously quips at the beginning of his hit single, The Call of Cthulhu, the most fortunate thing about the human mind is the inability to correlate all of its contents. According to Lovecraft, the sciences each strain in their own little way to discover this and that, but someday, if we do too much science, it will piece together such dissociated or otherwise dissociated bits of knowledge and reveal how meaningless our position is therein in reality that we will either go mad, his words, or flee into the safety and sanctity of a new dark age. For Lovecraft, scientific enlightenment reveals the fundamental truths that we cannot even understand about the world. If we do too much science, according to H.P. Lovecraft, we will discover equations we cannot calculate, geometries we cannot imagine, and if we really strain ourselves trying to encompass the world's truths in our minds, our poor minds will burst. The horrifying truth in Lovecraft is that the universe cannot really be known. The meager concepts that we have as animals, as little mammals on this planet, they're only equipped to do limited things. We can only encounter and process limited little stimuli as little animals. The universe is too wide and vast for us, says Lovecraft. Chambers' horror, I think, denies this. For Lovecraft, the fundamental truths of the universe are too horrible to know. That very fact is enough to horrify. But for Chambers, the truth of the universe is knowable, and it's depressing. For Lovecraft, the true horror is non-Euclidean geometry that you could in principle detect with science that will make your brain explode. But for Chambers, it's the heart-wrenching realization that there is no love in the universe. They're very different. For Chambers, the horrifying things can be known, grasped, and they affect you emotionally. For Lovecraft, they cannot be known or grasped. There's an intellectual overload. These are different views of cosmic horror. I would say that Chambers' ideas about cosmic horror are more typical of the 19th century Enlightenment-era fears about an atheistic universe, whereas Lovecraft is looking forward and thinking about science fiction as well. You might say that for Chambers, truth is a phantom, and for Lovecraft, truth is a category mistake? Now, on this topic, I should also mention the work of Robin D. Laws, not just in his capacity as a fiction author in such works as New Tales of the Yellow Sign, Fifth Imperative, and The Missing and the Lost, all King in Yellow fiction, but also in interviews with him about his RPG, The Yellow King, for his Gumshoe system. In interviews about the King in Yellow mythos and the role that it played in his RPG, Robin Laws distinguishes H.P. Lovecraft-style cosmic horror from what he calls reality horror. According to Laws, Lovecraft was interested in the idea of uncovering fundamental truths, fundamental things that are down at the bottom levels of nature, facts about our reality. But the King in Yellow stories, at least the scary ones, according to Robin Laws, are not about that at all. Instead, they're about the horror of some other world, a different world than our own, being laid on top of ours, coming in to invade ours, to take the place of ours, to contaminate and usurp. This, he says, is reality horror. It's not the horror of something deep about our world being discovered that then throws everything into question. Instead, it's the horror of some other place's arbitrariness, overriding our own for no reason. What is Carcosa? Where is it from? How does it work? Why is it coming in? Who wrote about it and why? Doesn't matter. The universe is out and Carcosa's in. And you'll never understand why. Not because science is about to discover fundamental truths too profound for you to comprehend. It's just because this stage play and its characteristic world are so other. It's reality horror, not, as Robin Laws says, cosmic horror. I really like Robin Law's distinction between cosmic horror and reality horror as he draws it, but I don't think that distinction alone really illuminates the horror as you might read it pervading all of the other stories in Robert W. Chambers' 1895 anthology. I don't think Chambers was as focused on the weird horror of another world overriding our own, as much as he was focused on the idea of losing all truth and meaning, i.e. the phantom of truth. Or how would you put it? Let me know in the comments. Thanks very much for watching this and my other lectures on the King in Yellow. More will be coming soon. And have you found the yellow sign?